Thank you. What I want to talk about today is what I call the two strands. And in this setting, it can be, it can be a little bit dry. But it's very important to me because, let me say what the two strands are. And this is mine, I'm saying, and I don't know if other people have done it or not, I just don't know. Sometimes be useful to sort of investigate the literature in counseling, psychotherapy, and wider fields.
My experience of studying that is that they don't think like that. They don't have the two strands. Only one counts.
And what the two strands are, to put simply, is I call them the professional. This is in the helping profession, the therapeutic arts and sciences, I like to call them. There's the professional and academic strand, and there's what we call the community strand. And that title is actually Mary's. And what I'm saying is that, going back, a few years, like 6,000 or 7,000, there have always been two strands in this particular field of human endeavor. There's the academic, professional, official strand that is recognized by the state and the power structure, whatever form that state and power structure takes. And then running alongside that, there has always been what we call it, the community strand, which is, I think, started off mainly with women. It is outside the power structure. They were healers, medicine women. Often they didn't have any title at all, but it was just someone that people would go to because, pardon me, because this particular person, whether she was almost an individual who was just particularly skilled and talented, I guess I would use the word inspired, or she was part of a lineage that went back to other people in her family, her mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, great-great-grandmother, a lineage of women who were healers. And that developed, and I'm saying that's always been the two strands there. Bring it forward, there are, and particularly today, particularly in, probably some countries more than others, there's an emerging ever since the civil rights movement, the American, the civil rights movement, the women's movement, there have been pockets of people who were providing a therapeutic service in a therapeutic dimension who were not part of the official strand. And this work was first presented by my colleague Anne Wright, who has now retired, at Community High School in Ann Arbor, Michigan, because she presented a course there for 10 years that was not only Pellin, but the large proportion of it was Pellin that she called a practical psychology. And they were bright, ambitious kids in, you know, a relatively famous American college town. They're ambitious. They were going somewhere. They're all going to go to the U of M or other prestigious universities. They're great kids. That was my first, yes, I hadn't thought of it this way before, but that was my first way of teaching this way, which via Skype, all those years ago now. And I wanted to give them a comfortable way of seeing where Pellin fitted in, okay? So that's why I came up with these two strands. That's the sort of history of it. But then I became more ambitious about it because it worked, you know. And it does fit Pellin into a very long history and very long tradition. And as I said, I think over the centuries, millennia, most of these were women, and I've done quite a bit of writing about sort of speculating, you know, where does this sort of work start from? You know, where did it start? And as we know, and getting into that in a moment, it has been around a long time, but the side of it that was in the community strand is traditionally not recognized very much, opposed, and you know, and even persecuted. You know, the healers were witches. You know, the fact that they had particular skills, and they were outside what was initially a religious officialdom. You know, what they did was not accepted. Yeah, Mary.
I was just thinking that fostering fits into that the foster carers are seen but not valued for their healing power, and it's the official people, social workers and so on. And then I was thinking, well, often in recent history, calling that 6,000 to 7,000 years, the community strand, as it with AA or 12-step programs, does more effective work, but isn't recognized for it.
Yes, yeah. And not only recognize, maybe it's stopped now, but when, because just running the history, my reading of it, and it is speculative. One of the things, because I do take this back 30,000 years, and because it cannot be debated that 30,000 years ago, there were relatives of ours there somewhere. I mean, there wasn't some point in history where history was recorded, because that's where history starts, when something is recorded. Oh, okay, our family started then, right? Well, no, I mean, our families must go back all the way. That simply, you can't get away from that. And I'm a great fan of the writer Jean Auel, that's Auel, like a super fan. Like recently, I got into a really down place. And Nikki said to me, why don't you read some of that lady caveman novels that you like? And I really like that. And I did, and it put me in a good mood. Talk about true rest. But
The
I really
Painted
like,
Caves,
yeah,
Painted Caves, Clan of the Cave Bear, Ballet of the Horses,
yeah, all of
Mammoth
that.
Hunters.
Yeah, all of it. I'm a huge fan.
Me too.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And she has a particular. She is placing her stuff sort of roughly 30,000 years ago, and I sort of study stuff like art history and political theory, and the people, the academics, who talking about things that long ago, they don't know. They're just speculating. I mean, there is not history then. There's archaeology, which is something that survived 30,000 years, which is sort of something that's hard as pottery and bones and rocks. That's what all sorts of other stuff, like who were the foster carers, has not survived. And just to share with you, earlier today, I presented. There's this small group in London that I belong to called the South London Philosophy Club, and I present papers. They're academic philosophers mainly, and I present papers there. And it's a place where I can wax philosophical because that's the nature of the group. But anyway, I presented a paper today on, I called it Ships That Pass in the Night. And it was about how therapy and, the stuff I presented here in another way, there it was presented from a philosophical point of view. The implications of the therapeutic world, the therapeutic dimension, and the political world, the political dimension, not being able to meet for various reasons, looking at some of them why. And as I spent time looking into that, as it is right now, we don't meet, and we've mutually got things to offer, but I think even if it was a radical person, even if it was a radical, maybe the radical women, maybe and the radical men, the young ones, maybe they can turn it around. But the thing I presented in that paper was it's death. It's, you know, a politician cannot go to a therapist and have that information be made public. It'd be death knell to their career. I mean, that's sort of bonkers. But anyway, that was that particular theme to that particular group. But the reason I wanted to share that a little bit with you is that that is a place where I can speculate, okay? And I do. I'm presenting stuff like, you know, we can have a voice about what happened 30,000 years ago. And to that group, and I'm developing it, I've got a theme that empathy and compassion, what Mary just said, started with foster carers, and that there have always been foster carers. You know, foster care before there were teachers, because the earthquake happened, as Stacey and I know, and she lost her family totally, and she was 5 years old, and she was naked. She'd been attacked by a cave bear, and she was lying on the ground, naked, dying. And these people picked her up and brought her up. So I've sort of taken that and my own, you know, deep investigation of fostering when I was working with them.
I disagree, though. I think teachers have come before foster carers, or maybe it happened at the same time, because every mother's a teacher and every father's a teacher.
Well, then when you take it that way, then you get into this whole debate, right?
Right.
There were teachers before there were teachers.
Right. Teachers before there were official teachers.
Yeah. So, and if you go back that far, or even a bit further, speculatively, there weren't two strands. There was just the cave or the clan. But trying to get a little bit more back on track here, and I said, you know, I wanted to investigate in terms of what the literature is, or the informal literature. But my sort of reading is the first element, major element in the community strand that was not female was AA. And one of the things, and AA to me is my proof that there is a community strand, and it's very powerful, and it's always been there. And it consists of, at times, consists of people who are enormously creative, geniuses, hard word to use, but that's my view. And it's always been there, and Pellin fits within that. Because almost formally, and it really comes from another place, but formally, my position as someone involved in fostering is that foster carers do more significant work than psychotherapists, counselors, or social workers. And I can say that because I'm each of those three. And they do fit into the two-strand theory. You know, I wanted to call it a theory because, you know, we've only got our little part of the truth, and someone else could see this from a different perspective. But I think that, so I call it the two-strand theory. And I think the two-strand theory can, it's relatively new in terms of Pellin's history. Like Like I literally developed it for Anne Wright's class, you know, because these were sort of top-notch students at a very good high school in a college town. So I just wanted to develop from for them, making them a bit easier to see where this fitted in. And since then, and that was probably about 15 years ago. And I've been working on it and developing it since, and to me it holds up. And if you take, yeah, Mary.
Sorry, trouble with my mic. Well, I wanted to say, I was thinking of it in relation to authority. You know, the official strand says we are the only ones that have authority. We're the only ones that have a socially accepted force, as David Pellin called it. But that's because they, you know, the mostly white, mostly male patriarchy sets the rules. And one of the important things about this idea is saying no. You know, community strand has always had its own authority. The women healers that lived in the woods had an authority that was recognized by the people who took her their chicken or their potatoes to get her healing. And so part of this really fits in with Pellin being political and radical and saying we're claiming an authority as the community strand that we also claim for 12-step programs that are sort of accepted by professionals. They make all their people, if they're running addiction centers, they make all their people go to the groups, but they don't give it full recognition it deserves. And I see it, this for Pellin being part of a democratic voice, but also for similar community organizations.
Yes.
You know, like you could say Black Lives Matter or something. You know, this is a voice of community saying we do count and we do have authority.
Yeah. And, you know, and authority is a useful tool there, because the vulnerability of the community strand, well, I've experienced it myself. I've experienced with David Pellin. Can you tell me where you got your PhD? Can you tell me where you went to school? Where was your internship? I mean, you know, they're questions like, they're questions totally based on the class system. Just totally. Yeah, in England, the incredibly powerful private schools in England with a funny sort of just weird use language are called public schools. If someone went to a public school, they went to one of the most expensive, prestigious schools in the country. They went to Eton. And there's an expression, public school boy, which is a way of talking about the elite. That's simple. And within that, so the expression, what's in England, I think it's, no, I was going to say dying out. No, it ain't. The Prime Minister of England at the moment. You know, what school did you go to? And particularly, I can't do it with a posh accent. Means I want to place you within the class system and within the ranking order within the class system. You get an incredibly similar thing in America in terms of the elite universities and Ivy League and
Ivy League, yeah,
Ivy League, all that stuff. So, this is something we're working on. I'm not sure it's even, Anne has it written up, Anne Wright, get it from her, be on my computer somewhere, but I guess it's something I think we need to make more of in this time, because of the opportunities that are around with this technology that we're using now.
Even in the Greek system at college, I mean, you get a big sister and a big brother, and it's kind of nourishing, and they help you get through classes. We had the buddy system, we took notes on different days and shared our notes, and we had copies of old tests. It was academic dishonesty, but we had copies of old tests and we made use of them.
Right. Yes. Yes.
So that's kind of community too, in a way.
Yes. Yes. That's where, over time, we've got it pretty much defined now, but over time, I think we'll develop where it fits in with other things. But in some way, it can amuse me a little bit. Yeah, I've been around the field of substance abuse. Well, before that expression was used, substance abuse is a relatively new expression. I've been around that longer than Pellin. That was before I met Dave Pellin, before I met Fred Pearl. And even by social workers who are sort of working on the ground, you were supposed to refer someone, I don't know what they called. Well, I know what one was called because she's not here now, but in this meeting, Alcoholism Council.
Oh.
Because that was staffed by social workers, and you're expected to refer people there. I mean, and up until recently, although it might still be around, there was this little niche group at Harvard University whose purpose in life was to publish papers to prove AA was ineffective and corrupt. And that will be in the public domain. They produced all these papers. And I imagine if there's still anyone with that sort of tact in a university these days, they've probably just got to shut up because they'll be ridiculed.
The Jack Alexander article was written to disprove AA, and he found out how well it was working, and he sang our praises for the Saturday Evening Post.
Wow.
It's a pamphlet
you
that Jack
what
Alexander
that date
acted.
Yeah.
But it's a pamphlet. You can get it from AA.org, the Jack Alexander article.
What's the first name?
Jack, Jack, Alexander article, pamphlet from AA.org.
Peter, Cynthia's got her hand up.
Yeah, go.
I was just thinking that sounds like it sounds like it's almost like the tool of threat to authority with the academic stand against the community strand.
Yes, absolutely. It's one of the places where David's thing of threat to authority is just totally applicable and totally brilliant. Of course, that's what it is over and over and over again. And, I like to put in, well, I got into wanting to do the evolutionary speculation. Actually, before I read Jean's novels, Just because I was always interested, you know, where it come from. Now we know where organized religion came from. You know where science came from, sort of. Sort of, we know where these things came from. But another way we don't. You know, who invented the wheel? Who, you know, olives are a rather unlikely thing, fruit, to produce this wonderful oil. Or grapes are rather unlikely to produce wine. You know, someone, we've been brilliant going back all that far. My thing today was, you know, developing the theme of politics and therapy I've done here. You know, the position I take is that we don't know how to govern ourselves, and that's, I'm saying that's an obvious fact. And Norway could come along and say, "Hey, wait a minute, we do. We know how to work. We know how to govern ourselves." But from, you know, totally a project I'm involved, very, very, very much involved in Zimbabwe. To what's happening in America, what's happening in England, what's going to happen this weekend in, you know, resort, you know, Labor Day weekend resort towns in America. We don't know how to govern ourselves. We're not good at it. And the community strand has often been crucial in developing that. If you bring in, as a parallel example, if you look at the development of art, you know, what they were doing 15, 20,000 years ago in the caves, by the way, is as good as anything we produce today in some way. I mean, the creativity, the use of paint, the use of line. So, you know, we've got this sort of brilliance. I think I've used it here at other times, looking at the evolutionary stuff. You know, Kazantzakis, the Greek writer, best known for Zorba the Greek, he said, we're like, in terms of evolution, we're in the adolescent stage. We're brilliant, energetic, and potentially very destructive. We are not at a mature stage. We are at an adolescent stage. And that sort of thinking motivates me to, you know, I'm comfortable, you know, saying, you know, foster carers do better things than the professionals, and the fact that AA has not received a Nobel Peace Prize is destructively weird. Okay, just weird. You know, the lives saved is indisputable, and that you know, some of the background. This another theme of my work is that fact-based and research-based methodology, theory, and belief has to be looked at. My latest thinking around this, what are the unintended consequences of this? Because people say it's got to be, you know, fact-based, fact-based, fact-based. And I said, well, what about the most successful therapeutic program in history? No question. And it's not fact-based, it's personal contact-based. You know, someone gets to AA because someone tells them there is AA. You know, what? Yes, I didn't have the word then. There's fact-based, but there's also word-of-mouth based. And maybe that needs to be looked at. But I have to have my arguments precise and succinct, not just to be laughed out of a meeting. Because it's got to be research-based, it's got to be fact-based. I mean, everyone agrees to that. There's no debate. I'm coming along and saying, wait a minute, what about word-of-mouth based? And what about AA?
What about nudge from the judge based?
Say again?
Legal based, because a lot of people get to AA if we call it nudge from the judge.
Yes, yes.
They get a 501 or a drunk driving, whatever the legal term is. They get a drunk driving, they have to go to drunk driving school, they have to go to 30 AA meetings, and they have to get their court card signed.
Yeah, and that's a bridge in a way. That's one of the bridges, and I think we could find other ones, particularly about pandemics, historical pandemics. You know, people sort of build a bridge between the official and the unofficial, between the professional and the academic strand and the AA strand.
But it's still denigrated in this. Sorry, go ahead.
So I've been thinking about how these two strands work in relation to something else I've been contemplating, which is authority and the way somebody can have authority that is extensive within what I would call the secret economy and almost none at all in the official economy. And what I mean by the secret economy is...
What do you call, I missed the word, the secret?
Secret economy?
Yeah, I thought you said that, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so the very prime example of this is my sister, who has a award named after her for baby wearing advocacy, which is, the
sound is not very good. What sort of advocacy?
Baby wearing, as in slings and baby carriers and that kind of thing.
Ah, right, yep.
And, in terms of salary, this is not something that can make anyone a dime. But if my sister says, there is someone in need here, I have no doubt she could get that person's rent paid for. She could get 5 or 6 very expensive, well-made baby carriers to them. Their groceries brought in by the van load. And that's a lot of resources to call on very short notice, but it never boils down to a paycheck. So within this community that has almost no official standing, my sister has enormous authority, but in the overall community, she has next to none.
Yeah. Yes, so I think, thank you for that, because I think there are ways that this sort of approach can be applied to other things, because, you know, there was the painter who, he painted a lot of sort of portraits of the lady who owned the cafe. And partly he didn't have any money, you know, he was nobody. Now, the only person who recognized his art was his brother, okay? So he painted a lot of paintings of the lady who owned the calf. And if they went on the market now, I don't know, probably couldn't work out the price of a Vincent van Gogh portrait, you know, all the authority, you know, it might be 50 million, you know, through the roof. And yeah, you know, he had no, and I think this is where the tool of authority and what we have in the tool of authority is really powerful, and we can take it elsewhere. And, you know, fortunately, his brother kept all the letters. And the letters, you know, I think, is one of the most expensive books in the world. It's a volume, hardcover reproduction of Vincent van Gogh's letters, or you can go on the internet and find all the letters translated into English, you know, from the great Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. I mean, the authority there is enormous around him. And, you know, back then, you know, when he was painting the picture of the lady, you know, who ran the calf, 6 months, probably, I think, something like that, before he killed himself.
He was bipolar.
Yeah.
And he painted a Starry Night when he was in the asylum.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting.
Mm.
I'm talking about resources that can be called on in the present, but not through official means.
Your sounds a bit funny. Is it plugging it in? You it's a bit like breaking up. Like,
Elizabeth, I think it was working a bit better when you held it a bit closer to your mouth than you were just now. She's had this problem for a few weeks.
Oh, okay.
Just, you know, it's never very good, but try again and we'll see if we can hear you.
Is this better?
Sort of, yeah, minimally. Go ahead, try anyway.
Yeah, partially the sound I'm getting from you is not very good, and that's my internet, and that's always like that on the weekend. But I'm talking about resources that can be called upon in the present, but not through official means. And partially it's because what my sister offers is through that second community strand. And therefore, her authority isn't recognized by the people who write the paychecks.
Yeah.
She's acting like a social worker, but she's not being compensated for being a social worker because she doesn't have the appropriate training.
Yeah.
Can I just come in with a an example of the two strands that I just thought of. When I was collecting people to write chapters for the book about my husband's films, I knew he'd be very pleased at the end result, because the end result is that we have 4 film academics in the official strand, but we have the granddaughter of the studio he made his first films with, someone who works at the British Film Institute, a director who became a film director because he was directly inspired by my husband, and 2 psychotherapists for whom this is not their official strand, that one's me and one's this other person who writes about King Kong, for who they're not in the official strand when they're writing about film. So there are actually more of us from what you might, and a film critic who's also not an academic. So there's more of us in what you might call the community strand of the book than in the official strand of the book. And I know that would have pleased John so much. So I really feel that's a valuable contribution I did in collecting people.
Yeah, well done. And I guess that is true. And I think democracy with all its faults, and one person, one vote, and the jury system, 12 citizens, not legal experts. Anyway, democracy, one person, one vote, the jury system, for a long time. All of Pellin have been provided some of my background arguments, because no one's going to come along and say, I think we should have a system where if someone has a PhD, well, then they get 7 votes. I mean, it will be laughed at. No one would even say it. That is a step, and no one would come along and say, I think the people with the most legal training, Cynthia.
Well, I was just thinking of how things in some ways are changing in terms of for opportunities in the community strand with the internet, with YouTube. Like I just finished a course and for astrologers on how to do a YouTube channel, and you can get yourself quite a bit of unofficial authority by having a YouTube channel, and actually some income too. And sometimes the instructor was making really good income, and it's kind of interesting, or writing a blog, or there's a lot of opportunities now that weren't there before for the unofficial strand.
Yeah, and I mean, I've got to indulge myself, and I'm sure I've said it before, so bear with me repeating a joke. But I read a lot, and I read a lot of literature, and the New York Review of Books, the London Review of Books, literary critics. I've got friends who had posts to American universities and universities and English department. That they were the people who sort of wrote book reviews, okay? And then along comes Amazon. And it's, I think you're absolutely right. There was even a term, literary critic. It's sort of gonna sound a bit antiquated. And my favorite literary review about my favorite novel, Moby Dick, was by a high school student, because I like looking at the 1-star reviews. They're fun. Anyway, she said, I'm Mary, I'm 17. I didn't like it. It's a book about an angry old man who wants to kill a whale. I mean, that is a brilliant literary review of Moby Dick. It is a book about an angry old man who wants to kill a whale. And I think that's where that's where I think the internet does provide opportunity, and it's happening in my field. I think it's happening because I don't follow a lot of things, but a couple of people have told me there are now ways to make a very good living as a psychotherapist because of the internet. As a psychotherapist, you don't call yourself a psychotherapist. There's another word people are using. I think people are playing with lots of words like friend, mentor, or something like this. And like people can, you know, start a career in pop music without a agent or contract with a recording company. I think there are a whole lot of areas where people are going to be able to do well, coming up through the commercial strand rather than the academic strand. It's going to happen. I mean, you know, how it will go and where it will go, you know, 10, 20, 30 years, I don't know. And the academic strand and the academic and professional strand is certainly not to be dismissed in terms of how they're able to hold on to power.
Just now you said commercial strand, but you meant community strand, right?
Yeah, sorry. Yes. So I think we're in a time of, and I want to call it enchanting opportunities, okay? In a whole lot of different ways. You know, because, you know, poor people who been in prison or gone to prison or coming out of prison, you know, they don't vote, they have no representation, they have no political power. And, you know, Cory Bush said, you know, on prime television, you know, I will support what is, you know, I will make sure there's unity in the Democratic Party. She's a woman who is going to go to Congress. She won an important election. And she said, but I will not lose sight of my constituents. And my constituents, you know, amongst my constituents are people who are incarcerated, people who have been incarcerated, and sex workers. I don't think anyone has said that on a national stage before. She said, they are my constituents. It's different. It's different. Joe, I was thinking of you when I was thinking about this topic today, because of a lot of your work. You want to come in?
I don't quite know what you were meaning, Peter, but I was thinking about a movement that started in 1971 in London called People Not Psychiatry, which came out of the anti-psychiatry movement.
Yeah.
And there was a conference called Anti-Psychiatry and the Left at Keele University. And at that time, it felt like a synthesis was possible between the academic and the community. You know, so writers like David Cooper and Lang were being published by Penguin, not by academic publishers. The conference was happening at Keele University, but everybody was smoking dope and loving up behind the sofas and things.
Yeah.
There was synthesis. I think the possibility of synthesis, perhaps, from 67 to 72, and then somehow that fell away.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that's what I've been thinking about, and I was off screen because I was trying to look up this conference so I could say something useful, and
yeah.
it's disappeared. It's not on the internet.
Yeah, well, I was thinking more about your researches into women sailors.
Well, what I'm thinking about is my interest in women working on ships is actually my metaphorical way of exploring how women deal with working in a man's world and very offshore. So the more I think about my past 20 years, the more I think I was interested in psychology, not maritime history.
Right.
Social
Okay.
psychology,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But you combined them.
Not enough. I'm doing it more now.
Yeah.
I hadn't realised that I was interested in the social psychology, not the rivets and the steam and the coal
Right.
and the fancy cafes and the water.
Peter, I was thinking that it feels like it would be good to have some shares and contributions. And I was, if you agree with that, I was thinking it might be interesting to, I know you've used the phrase with me and Nikki at least recently about authority story. I thought it might be interesting to do a little, for people to do a little sketch of their place in relation to community strand and authority strand over their work history or not work history. And I thought that might, it just might be interesting to hear that from people
Oh, it
reflecting
would
against
be.
the subject.
Yeah, it would be.
Shall I have a go at it?
Yeah.
So I, as you know, I was kind of disabled in inverted commas by my extreme mood swings. So for most of my life, the small authority I had was within the initially within the community strand of the community model of Pellin, which is you teach, you heal by contributing and learn by teaching, is it something like that? And that's what I was doing. I developed a bit of authority inside Pellin, and when I took my 20 years break away, and I was using Pellin tools and my spiritual understanding to work with people and heal people, I was completely in the community strand because I had zero authority in the official world. But I was pursuing a healing path and contributing from my caring life force as best I could with not being very well. And when I first came to America, I was very much in the community strand because nobody had heard of contribution training. So I volunteered wherever I could get a place in community health center and transitional housing for families, worked with the children there, in a homeless shelter for mentally ill women. And then I gradually entered the official authority strand by saying, okay, in California, I have to go for some official authority. What actually happened once I had my license was I refused to diagnose, using medical diagnosis. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I didn't like the official strand at all. And in recent years, when I've had inquiries for people to work with me, I've told them about Pellin and suggested they work with me as a coach because I wanted to stay in the community strand, and I too much I wasn't prepared to tolerate or swallow in the official strand. and I do keep up my license, even though I actually don't practice. As a bridging thing, I suppose, is to have that in a way to try and exploit, if it came up, to have an advantage if there's dealings with the official strand. Then I have an advantage in not having a PhD, but in having a license number, that I actually use that in service to the community strand. That's the intention of it anyway. Does anybody else think they can translate their story into these two strands? It's really interesting to hear from you. And remember, the community strand here in this container, as in this thing, the community, I know some of us don't, you know, are more like I was when I was younger and don't have a lot of official authority in the official strand. So remember that you're in a place where the community strand is as, if not more important, in the minds and hearts of Pellin people. So be brave and talk about, you know, where yourself in, you know, allow yourself to talk about yourself in relation to the community strand, and be creative about reimagining your life with this idea.
I'm a healer of the metaphysical kind. I pray for people and I send healing energy, and it heals people. I've laid hands on people like the Christians do. I pray for whatever God they believe in, and I send yellow healing light to them over the phone or in person. And I've healed pain, I've healed coughs, and I've listened. I'm a really good listener. One of my sponsors said, nobody listens to you like Stacy does.
Wow.
And my friends have told me that I remind them of a therapist because I listen and I'm insightful.
I think if we took that expression, nobody listens like Casey does. I mean, my sort of speculative stance, which I want to really claim the right to, someone said that to someone 10,000 years ago. Same thing, right? They did, you know, we'd be fairly sure of that. And someone was a sort of genius leader and influenced a lot of other people. And someone else, this is my speculation, you know, it's easy for you and I because you can see where it comes from in terms of the novel. Someone else said, well, you know, I'm the leader. How can you say that she listens better than I do? And that went on for a while. And then that guy said to himself, wait a minute, she's got something I don't have. And then she got the recognition, the satisfaction, the social acceptance force, and she became a leader in thought, you know, a sort of intellectual giant, disappeared into the, you know, mists of time, never to be recovered. But I'm speculating she was there. And, you know, the leader is saying there's something about listening. Yeah, so thanks for that. Cease?
Well, I've tried to have a combination of both of these strands you're talking about. Having a PhD as a licensed psychologist means that I can do things that other people might not be able to do. So I can help somebody. I do a lot of Social Security work where diagnosis is the thing to get somebody Social Security. So to be able to document that for the person, to listen to what is going on with them and document it and talk about how that's affected their work life is what's needed to get those funds. So without that kind of thing, these folks would not get Social Security. And if somebody just writes up some facts, you know, that's not enough. So it's important to have both those lines where you can relate to people, get them to talk about themselves and feel comfortable, and then be able to write that and document. It's very important. And Social Security would not work without those skills that people have. And then the same for court work. If I can document people have mental health problems that might be related to their crime or to their arrest, and these are the supports they need now, that weighs a lot with a judge. But it's not just my degree, it's being able to explain that to the judge or to the people in court. So again, it's a both thing. And it's what the state recognizes, the degree, but then the judge will recognize what your knowledge is and how you're providing that to them, whether it's helpful to them. So I think it's, there's a place for the marriage of those two things. It's really important to get things done. I was writing some letters to Congress recently. There's kind of some standard letters, but me putting in that I'm a psychologist, I've worked on this thing with child detention, or I've worked on this violence against women, or whatever, carries some weight. And so when I go into a congressperson's office and talk about that, that carries some weight, and it is important. Now, I can't talk about nuclear weapons in the same way because I don't have the background in that, but I can talk about my opposition to them, but it's not the same thing. So there's places where people can use both of those things, and having some warmth and being able to talk to people and listen to their story and present that is, you know, really important. So anyway, I was feeling a little uncomfortable, but it is helpful if people can get some kind of documentation about their skills that will help people pay attention to what they're saying and understand why they're saying these things. So anyway, there's dozens of places where that's really helpful. And, you know, and it is a long, grueling, horrible time sometimes to get that degree or whatever, or that license or whatever. But it can be really worthwhile to society. So I would never want to discourage anybody from working at finding documentation for their skills.
Yeah, that's, you know, because in this presentation and coming off the other presentation to the philosophy club, you know, I'm sort of coming from my little bit of the truth. But in terms of authority, and this was in the late 60s, okay, through to 1970, which was the slightly wild time that Joe referred to. But in developing the concept of authority, David was really clear. You never stand in the way of someone developing their authority. He was sort of adamant about it. So if you've got an alternative point of view, you know, that's fine. That's your little bit of the truth. But if someone's developing their authority by going into what here we're calling the professional and academic strand, you encourage that over and over again. And when I first set up Pellin, I worked with a colleague, his name is Ken Winter. He's in Ann Arbor. And Ken had 2 PhDs, one in psychotherapy, one in computer science. I didn't have any PhD. Ken was also always encouraging people, there's another way than the university, okay? But he had all the university stuff. I was always encouraging people, no, you know, get a degree, you know, get a law degree, get a social work degree, get a medical degree. They open doors. They open doors like nothing else. So, you know, I think there's a, you know, we've got tools here that we can look at in a lot of different ways.
And I'm not saying, just to be clear, that there's other ways to have a degree besides school, or you know, if you have books you've written, or the YouTube, or classes you've taught, or those kind of things, all those count as authority, I think. But that's something you can take in someplace and use it for good, you know, to, but it's just important for people to understand, I think, that you've got something to say, and they will look at your history in some situations, and I think it'll carry extra weight. I worry if somebody has all those skills but they're not presenting them, that people will be dismissed, and so if there's documentation that they've done this and this and this and that's it, you know, it really helps people. That's just the way we're made up. I hate to say it, but that really helps people get what's going on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I think that it's important to, I mean, I think that's wonderful, the way you've used your qualifications in that conscious way to contribute to the community at large. And absolutely, people need that. You know, they need somebody to be doing what you did, Cease. But I think that it is important to be aware of the privilege. I'm not talking about you personally. I'm just saying, you know, we know a foster carer who went to get an MA, but most of the foster carers probably wouldn't have the financial resources to follow that kind of official strand. So in what I'm saying, I'm trying to balance the value in our minds, in our little corner where Pellin work sees itself as in the community strand, to balance the importance of the community rather than tear down the value of using those qualifications. Like I said about myself, you know, I will use I kept the qualification on purpose, even though personally it's too hard for me to be filling in those insurance forms with diagnosis. I just can't, just found I couldn't do it, you know, only when I was training and I had to. So I hope you don't feel uncomfortable, because I think having, just as you say, or Peter saying, having building skills and qualifications is all part of the rich tapestry of how we can contribute to society. It's really, what I'm saying is, on a kind of political level, is saying the society at large tends to value the official academic thread, and hey, we're saying there's value elsewhere. It's not meant to be directed at anybody who holds things in that strand.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. The value is very important for foster carers and people. I went through graduate school making $3.25 an hour. So, I mean, I was working at a center for people with developmental disabilities. It was back in the horrible days of that. But there's a lot to be gained from doing that. I mean, it's a wonderful work to do. It's very important. I really appreciate the value what people are doing who don't have a degree. So I'm just saying it, in some situations, it helps to have it. And You just have to figure out what path you want. Or
Yeah.
but I think part of the problem in my case was that if I had not had some people who helped me get onto that path, who helped me get into graduate school, who showed me how to do it, I would have never done it. So there seems like there's got to be, I don't know, this may be way off topic, but for those people who want to continue somehow expanding their repertoire, that there's a way to help support their work. Does that make any sense?
Oh, total makes sense, because I knew you when you did that work, okay? And people burn out, and you know, some don't. You know, some are just saints. If I was a saint, I would have stayed working in a prison in Canada. And in some ways, I can almost say that might have been the best work I ever did. Okay, but I wasn't. I couldn't. I'm not a saint. I couldn't keep going into those places. So I think one of the things we've got that's really powerful is evaluating in terms of hurt and purpose, what is called evaluation strata. Because it's hard to keep I call it cold face. It's hard to keep on the cold face for 30 or 40
Ignore
years.
her. Pixie, stay here. I don't think Seamus wants to take you. Pixie? Sorry. Sorry, I wasn't muted.
That's all right. Yeah. Nikki, do you want to come in?
I had just had to hang up for a while, and I only just came back, so sorry I missed it.
Oh, that's
Can
all
you hear
right.
me now? Okay.
Yeah.
Peter, it's 25 past, so we should
Yeah, I'm
probably
aware of
ask
that.
if, sorry, just maybe ask if anyone else particularly wants to share about their
Yeah.
authority, and if they don't, we can
Yeah.
move towards ending.
Well, one of the things I had a lot to think about in terms of that, but one of the things that when I was, growing up, because I was always did well in school, and so I was sort of always pushed towards the academic professional, and I did, and now I'm kind of, I'm almost like kicking myself, because it's like, well, if I had just done what I wanted to do, all my life, I would actually be established. I'd have a lot of unofficial authority, and I probably actually have made a whole lot more money than, because I see other astrologers who did do things, and it's sort of, and I don't know what else. I mean, and I think, well, I did get value from that and stuff, but anyways, that was just something that came to mind.
Yeah, I think, if we sort of step back from it a bit and see it as tools, okay? And there is, in Pellin, we do not in any way run away from moral judgments, ethical judgments. They're in the part of the work that is called strata. You can look that up in the manual that's online, but it's evaluating in terms of hurt and purpose in this one. And if I had it to do again, I think I would have and a couple of people really wanted me to do this way back. Peter, find some simple way to get an MA or a PhD, a bit like C said, we'll help you through it. You might need it, and Pellin would be further along had I done that. If I had it to do again, I think I would do that. you know, plus what Cease is saying, you know, almost ruthlessly, find some way to get a book out there, you know. And, you know, those two things. So, you know, we do have tools, and we evaluate in terms of hurt and purpose, and then we go deep, you know, which is the therapy part of our work. We go deep. Well, what is the part, in terms of what Mary said, what is the part of my authority story that didn't go in those directions? I can take that back to my dad, you know, so, you know, we're using authority as a, you know, as not just a chapter heading, but a, you know, a section heading for a whole bunch of chapters. Yeah. Okay, we'll be ending there for this part of our time. And I'm Peter. I'm in Norfolk in England. And yeah, it's been a big day for me looking at these, you know, big issues. Okay, so thank you. Yeah, do you want to go next, Cynthia?
I'm Cynthia. I'm in Kankakee, and this has been a very interesting and I've a lot to think about. Thanks.
Okay, Cease.
Cease, Tampa, Florida. Hope I didn't sound overbearing. But anyway, I wanted.
You didn't. Okay.
All right. Thank you for letting me talk.
Yeah. Yeah, just to say it, you know, I followed that career of yours, although we went through decades when we weren't in touch. So, yeah, I like it. And just to say it, I was worried about you burning out, okay, way back. Yeah. Joe?
I'm Jo. I'm in Yorkshire. It's been very interesting today. It's lovely hearing about people's different experiences. I got my PhD quite late, and I really enjoy saying to people, they're going to treat me very nice in my old people's home when I get there, you know. It is the word doctor is a very handy tool.
Yes.
To use, as well as an alienating one. People do feel frightened of you and reluctant to talk, and attribute things to you, as well as it being very handy. Okay. I wish you'd got your PhD, Peter. It would have been useful to you. Yeah. And of course you could very easily.
Thank you. Nikki?
I'm Nikki. I'm in Wimbledon. Sorry, I missed that part where everyone was sharing. Took me longer to come back on than I thought. And I'm just inspired by what Jo just said. I've never been attracted to getting a PhD, but the thought of, they would treat you better in the old folks' home because they know you've got a PhD.
That's evaluating in terms of hurt and purpose.
Absolutely. It's like everybody should do that. They could retire and get a PhD so they don't get treated like shit in old people's homes. Brilliant.
Elizabeth?
You still could do it, Nikki.
I think I might. It's the only thing that's ever made me pick up my ears and be at all interested in a PhD. So thank you.
Elizabeth?
Yeah.
Hi.
I'm in Eugene, Oregon. I'm realizing that just the same as I'm bad at taking photographs, I'm bad about talking about my authority. And that's a problem. So that's something I'm thinking about.
Okay. Stacy?
Hi, I'm Stacy. A lot to think about. And at the end, after we wrap up, don't forget I wanted to show you guys my pictures for
Yep.
anyone who can stay.
Yep, for sure. Mary?
Hi, I'm Mary in Rosarito Beach, and thank you, Stacey. I was going to remind everybody as well. So for anyone who wants to stay, we have a little art showing.
Okay.
Could I say one more funny thing about the
Yeah.
PhD? I was in a line at the airport and they saw on my ticket, it said Dr. Yoakum, and they said, come on up, Dr. Yoakum. So I got, they had me come and get in line first, which felt a little bit bad, but not too bad because I wanted to get on that plane. So, so it
Yeah.
came, it was kind of funny. It had nothing to do with anything that they,
Yeah. Okay. Well, some of us are going to stay on, and that's the end of the forum bit of it.